clearly this book has touched a nerve. There is a quite widespread feeling of concern about the issue of inequality in New Zealand.
I think it's interesting that in New Zealand we're very aware of the issue of poverty. You know, a lot of people will know that there are over 200,000 children living in poverty, for example, but we haven't thought a lot yet about inequality as such. But what you've been telling people, isn't it, that you really have to focus on the top of the income distribution, not just the bottom?
The issue of inequality is kind of slid into the issue of poverty, and so when governments are doing something about the poor, that is interpreted as in some way covering the problem of inequality. What that ignores is that the problem of poverty is the other side of soaring income disparity, especially between the top 1% or 2% and everybody else. Because if income is being increasingly concentrated at the top, then the other side of that is that incomes lower down in, say, the bottom 50% are going to be inevitably stagnant or even falling in order to allow for this increasing share of income up at the top.
Sure, and I think you can see that in New Zealand, where if you look at what has happened in the last 30 years or so, incomes at the top have doubled, whereas they've barely increased at all for people on very low incomes. But also even people in the middle of New Zealand are hardly better off than they were 30 years ago.
Yes, it is really dramatic to see the chart of what has happened to the incomes of people in different positions in the income distribution, so that the image that comes out from the chart is like the jaws of a snake. That is, this is the bottom jaw, and then the top jaw is coming up like that. That's the position that New Zealand has reached. It's not the most unequal of the developed countries, but it is certainly right up there with the United States, Britain, and some other countries in terms of the income concentration at the top.
But there's some wider social costs, isn't there? And in your lectures you've talked about health costs and financial costs and political costs. What are those bigger ways in which inequality affects society?
Inequality is a bit like, well, air pollution. It affects everybody in the society. Even the wealthy in the more unequal countries can't escape from the society-wide, the economy-wide costs. Everybody in a society is affected by the overall level of inequality. It's not just the poor who suffer. This is what has to be recognized in New Zealand, that the current levels, especially if they continue to increase, will make a society that is unpleasant even for the winners to live in. That's why the winners themselves do have an interest in reducing the overall concentration of income at the top.